Good afternoon to all of you, my dear viewers and loyal subscribers. I'm glad that we are meeting again today. In today's special broadcast, we are going to focus our attention on the most pressing and critical questions of our time, specifically those complex questions that concern the significant future developments and strategic shifts that will undoubtedly affect the entire continent of Europe as well as the nation of Ukraine for many years to come. Armenia and the whole world. That's why I titled today's broadcast, Why do the United States of America, the Caucasus, when the Middle East is on fire? I try to collect your questions, friends, so that I can answer 10 to 15 questions from the comments all at once, comprehensively. Today I will do the same, and we will analyze what is happening at the present moment. To understand what tomorrow will be like and what we will have to live with in that tomorrow. That's why I will start precisely with the title of this broadcast. And then we will go together on a deep journey to comprehensively analyze and evaluate all the individual building blocks and various components of the current situation we are facing today. What is happening now? The Middle East is on fire. What makes up the mosaic and the overall picture of the events taking place? How is the United States acting? How is Israel acting? How is Armenia acting? How are Azerbaijan, Turkey, and other countries acting? China, Russia? All of this will be discussed in today's broadcast. Please join us. I'm looking forward to your subscriptions and likes, and we move on. The vast global region of the Greater Middle East today is currently in a specific mode that I would personally call a state of carefully managed escalation. No side formally wants a major war, but almost every day there are incidents occurring that could trigger a chain reaction, create such a chain reaction that would lead to this war. First of all, there's the sea, that's the Hormuz. Secondly, there's the proxy perimeter, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. There's the frozen war in Gaza, where the freeze happened against the backdrop of a fragile truce. Israel, Gaza. There is a truce, but in many ways it's starting to crack. If we look at the reports from Reuters and AP, Israeli strikes on Gaza are continuing. There are casualties, and the Israeli side justifies its strikes. They explain them as responses to attacks and violations by militants and terrorists. The key factor in the fragility of the situation is as follows. For example, Rafah, the border crossing, which has been opened and closed, and even these technical coordination failures around the evacuation of patients immediately turn into a political crisis. The meaning of the truce in Gaza, right now it looks more like a low-intensity phase. And what is important to understand here is that any incident can bring back high intensity. At the same time, it should be noted for understanding the situation that here, Israel is imperatively controlling the situation. And here, the following component related to Israel is important. This is the Northern Front, this is Lebanon, this is Hezbollah, which is a constant risk. Hezbollah has retained its strength. Hezbollah coordinates its actions with Iran. Hezbollah has not been destroyed. What do we see? Israel announces strikes on Hezbollah targets. They explain that this is happening in response to repeated violations of the ceasefire. What does Al Jazeera say? Al Jazeera describes that even during a formal truce, there remain, let's call them control points, presence, and regular strikes, which maintains a high probability of, again, a sudden escalation. The point of understanding the situation around Israel is that Israel is holding two fronts at the same time. Gaza plus the north. That's the border with Lebanon. And this highlights and increases its sensitivity to the Iranian factor and the entire proxy perimeter. For now, that's all you need to understand to analyze the situation. What's happening in the US-Iran relationship? The sea aircraft carriers negotiations that are essentially taking place on a razor's edge. What do you need to understand here? The most important thing to pay attention to in recent days. The Iranian drone, friends, is the same type of drone that's destroying Ukraine. So the Iranian Shahed 139 drone approached the USS Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier. The US reported that this drone was destroyed by a fighter jet, by the most advanced fighter jet on Earth, the F-35C. Just one missile, because the Americans have many developments for self-defense purposes. Almost simultaneously, an incident occurred in the Strait of Hormuz. Iranian boats and a drone tried to stop and force a vessel to undergo inspection. An American ship was operating nearby and it prevented this seizure. Is it right to say that it died? At the same time, diplomacy? No. These are comprehensive strategies. Diplomacy is not dead. Nuclear negotiations are being discussed. There are significant statements from US President Donald Trump that if Iran does 1, 2, 3, 4, then there will be no war. But Iran, according to international experts, is demanding a change of venue and a narrowing of the negotiation agenda. So what does Iran want? For the discussion to be not about everything, but mainly about nuclear issues. At the same time, Trump is publicly maintaining a line of pressure. It's quite serious. Negotiations are ongoing, but this affects the whole world. How so? It keeps the markets on edge. Oil reacts to this. And accordingly, this affects each of us. As a matter of fact, I would even express it in a slightly different way. The point is that the United States, in order to define things more precisely, is taking two actions at once. A show of force, an aircraft carrier, escorts, responses to incidents, and negotiation pressure. At the same time, friends, you should understand that depending on the intensity of the fleet's deployment or its lack thereof, the minimum expenses are $20 million a day, and the maximum, with active fleet operations, is $100 million. It can't stay there forever. How is all this connected to Armenia, to Eastern Europe, to Ukraine, among others? And why is Vavence's visit woven into this Middle Eastern knot? But with Ukraine, the connection is direct. If the Southern Bloc is knocked out and the South Caucasus traditionally falls under US influence and an operation is carried out in Iran, then Russia and China suffer a global blow. A blow of global scale. Of course, this improves the situation in Ukraine. How is this connected to Armenia? Here it's important to understand the key logic of the United States. At the present moment, the security of routes and energy logistics. What is TRIP, the Donald Trump corridor, let's say in practical terms? What is this about? TRIP, how is it described in strategies? Let's pay attention to the definitions and terms. TRIP is described as a transit corridor, friends. A package of actual infrastructure. What does package mean? Railway, pipelines, optical fiber through the South Caucasus. And separately, this is not just a global initiative. Pashinyan and Aliyev, the integration of the energy systems of Armenia and Azerbaijan is mentioned separately. As an element of this framework, this needs to be understood. Why do the United States need all this in the context of Iran? There is a practical, pragmatic interest. When Hormuz, the Red Sea, and the proxy perimeter are unstable, the US and its allies look for more land and alternative connections. So there is a direct logic to all of this. In these land-based connections, there is less dependence on Iranian levers and maritime ones. On these points, these locations, in fact, this is a conclusion, an interpretation, based on the current crisis logic and a description of the corridor as a transit scheme. That's why this is being done. And this brings us to the question that concerns ethnic Armenians around the world and, accordingly, all citizens of the Republic of Armenia. What exactly does Vance's visit mean? I've dedicated several programs to this topic. Today, once again, to sum up and give a definition, here's what Trump said. Trump announced that Vance is going to Armenia and Azerbaijan in February to build on peaceful terms. To build what? A new world in the region. Peace, not war. And to promote the trip. That is the entry of the US into the point where the trip is. That's where it will be located. In other words, the visit is not about Armenia as a value, but about Armenia as a node in the root scheme and the stabilization of the perimeter as understood by the United States of America. Why is this beneficial for Armenia? What does this give Armenia, dear friends? And if, for example, this doesn't happen, although that's everything, what is Armenia left with? That's the right way to frame the question. This gives Armenia the constant political attention of the United States of America. This gives Armenia money, projects, and infrastructure. Of course, if they actually move forward with implementing this project. For that, the project needs to be realized. This gives Armenia a window for bargaining. It is tied to clear guarantees of sovereign control and security. What are the risks? Of course, the risk is that Armenia turns into a transit territory rather than a subject. But in order to be a subject, you have to work on it. That's why the wording here is very critical. Who controls the corridor? Who guards the corridor? What are the powers and where are the red lines? You see, I tried to be very brief, to outline the essence. YouTube says that bloggers and journalists should do hour-long streams so that they spread as widely as possible. I'm not a blogger or a journalist, I'm an analyst. I can also talk for an hour or an hour and a half, and today I actually have the time for it, but I try to give you information concisely and briefly. The essence is the informational content. For me, that's more important. Results and quality are more important than long conversations. I hope you find everything I do interesting. And I see it in your comments and in the fact that the channel is growing day by day. I want to thank each and every one of you, dear friends. It's also very important for me to talk with you, my audience. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, join the Telegram channel. All the options are in the description of this video and on the YouTube channel's About page. Thank you so much, and definitely, not just until we meet again, but I want to wish everyone clarity of mind, an understanding of reality, an awareness of this reality, and most importantly, action. A rolling stone gathers no moss, both in the life of every individual and on a global scale when it comes to countries. Thank you again, friends. Until next time. Goodbye.